what is actually an issue for you to address with your ex about what is happening in their house and what is not? What do you really have to let go of?
Welcome back to Pulling Threads, everyone. I'm your host, Leslie. And today we are diving into a topic that affects millions of families, but often leaves parents feeling really isolated, sometimes overwhelmed and uncertain. And I can attest to all of those feelings as a parent who has been through divorce. If you listen to our previous conversation with our guest today, Mackenzie Kinmond, you heard us explore parental burnout, old conditioning, and the four horsemen of parenting, which are people pleasing, perfectionism, overfunctioning, and self sacrifice. Also guilty of, I think, every single one of those. Today, we're bringing that same depth and compassion to one of the most challenging transitions a parent can face. We know divorce doesn't just change your relationship status, it activates every single pattern that we carry. I feel my nervous system rising up as I say it and tears coming. Like it's been a few years and it's still so fresh. So it really also asks us to show up for our children while navigating this grief, anger, fear, uncertainty. And if we think parenting is hard without divorce, adding in co-parenting, constant negotiations for some people, difficult custody schedules sometimes, guilt, pressure to protect your kids from the same pain you may be going through. So it's not a surprise that parents often feel they're barely surviving through this. So Mackenzie, I'm so happy to have you back. I think as soon as we wrapped the last episode, I said, I need to have you come back and we need to talk about this. I didn't have a parenting coach through my divorce, and I don't have one now. However, I do use my own therapist a lot for the things that come up for me now with co-parenting than with divorce. As a child of divorce myself, there was just so much that came up. And you have a unique perspective on how internal patterns show up during divorce. And more importantly, how shifting those patterns can help us navigate this transition with more presence, more authority, and as much grace as we can have. So I am excited to talk to you. And again, like last time, I feel like I will learn ways to navigate this ongoing situation for me. My children are 12, 15, and 28. And I will say that all three of them were still navigating life in a co-parenting situation and not being under the same roof. So Mackenzie, in our last conversation, we talked about how parenting activates our old programming and conditioning. I feel like just bringing this up activated me. So how does divorce amplify or intensify those patterns? And what are you seeing with parents that you work with?
Sure. Okay, that's a huge question.
Sorry. Hit you with a big right out of the gate.
I've been, like divorce has its unique experience, and then also it's also part of, anything that happens to us in our lives can activate old programming in different ways. And so I think so what I see often is that it can bring up whatever is still raw or unprocessed, or maybe even we know about it, but it still brings it up about our own childhoods, whether our parents stayed together or not, because healthy relationships are not just deviated by divorce or staying together.
Yeah.
And I'm also the child of divorced parents. My parents divorced when I was 17. And it also activates me even when I bring it up now. And at the same time, I think about my parents, I think what an incredible model of divorce they have been for me.
Mm.
What a model they've been actually a very important relationship model, even though they didn't stay together as a married couple.
Yeah.
And so just to say that we get activated with our dynamics with our partners and ex-partners about our own stuff that we went through as kids, whether our parents stayed together or not.
Right.
So all kinds of stuff, though, get activated. Of like, you can probably, I'm sure you can speak to this, but our abandonment stuff, our worth, our letting kids. One thing that I see is this real desire to do things differently, right? We're all trying to do best by our kids. Sometimes I think when we are trying to do things differently than what happened in our own childhood, again, whether our parents stayed together or not, we can sometimes overcorrect in that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that or
No.
if that's for what you see with the parents that you work with, Leslie.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And parents that I know, just people in my life who don't want to repeat or have their child go through something that they went through. And the overcorrection can sometimes be really extreme. Yeah. I think for me, I've lived a lot of my life saying internally, and my internal narrative has been, I'm not going to end up like my mom, of the situation she was in after a divorce. And it's driven me in some positive ways. And it's that side of me has also been harmful in some ways. And so when I feel that urge to put that on my kids or to inform them of that old narrative in a way that makes them think that they need it, I'm always catching myself and saying, no. So,
yeah.
But in the same way, like that driven mindset that I had was achievement based and academic based. And so there's a middle ground. I don't want my kids to think you don't need to do well in school. You don't need. So there is so much balancing.
Yeah.
There's a balancing act going on all the time because I don't want to put what I told myself on them, but I also don't want them to think that academics and achievement doesn't matter.
To be aware of our own baggage and use it to inform our values without feeling like we're projecting onto our kids. And I think what you named is so important, which is the awareness of our baggage. And baggage is not inherently bad. It's all of the things that we carry into our adult life. And some of it's good. Some of it's sometimes helpful and other times not helpful, the very same trait or reaction or whatever. And so I think, I'll bring back the theme, one of the themes from the last time I was here, which is around that curiosity piece and ability to self-reflect.
Yes.
And so when we are thinking about what we want to bring in, what we want to do differently, some of those things are some of the things that we want to do differently that drive us in other situations are going to get in our own way. So I think it's about reflecting and knowing that it is inevitable to pass things on to your kids.
Right. It's to happen.
It's going to happen and it's okay. It's actually like part of the human experience. And, sometimes I think when we're trying so hard to not pass anything on, I think that's when we sometimes can overcorrect, right? So an example would be if we lived in a house where there was a lot of bad mouthing between parents. And so then we may say, well, I'm never going to say anything bad about my ex, which is true. You should not badmouth your ex to your kids. Yes. But if you if you're going to the extreme and your kid is saying something that they're struggling with,
right,
and you're kind of saying, no, it's fine. Everything's good. You can get to a point where you're kind of denying your kid's own emotional experience because of your need for everything to feel good all the time and for there to be no tension or conflict. And so again, it's just that value of wanting harmony is beautiful, and let that drive you, but just develop that muscle of self-reflection and curiosity to, when am I doing this out of fear or
Mhm.
urgency,
Yep.
discomfort, or that need to not disappoint, or from my old abandonment wounds? And when am I doing it from a place that feels more firmly rooted in my own values?
I think that it's important to focus in a little bit on the example that you just gave too, because not only do we need to validate, that is so important. And I want to give an example of how that has shown up in my life specifically.
Yeah.
But I also want to circle back to another question that I have. But regarding that, an example of that that showed up very quickly for my myself and my children was I as we were going through, we were doing a collaborative divorce and we had a mental health professional, a mental health neutral, and we had to take classes. And I really listened and heard, like, we're not going to talk poorly, no matter what's going on between he and I in this process. We're not going to let the kids. And at one point, so my children's father has a very, very demanding career, one where people's lives are literally on the line. So through all of our marriage and now for my children, you're often forced to be a lower priority just because of the type of work he does. That obviously played a role in my feelings toward him and some of our issues because we did not navigate that well. So now, fast forward, I'm going through the divorce process and pickup times are canceled or they're delayed. And at first, in an attempt to never say anything negative, I did exactly what you said. It's okay. He's saving lives and his job comes first. And I quickly fought myself and realized how they feel is how they feel, right?
Yeah.
They have a right to be disappointed the same way I had a right to be disappointed when date night was canceled or my birthday was missed or whatever happened, right? Part of the issue was that we never dealt with the feelings. We just said they weren't allowed
Yeah.
and then there was shame. So I've worked really hard to never badmouth, but to always validate their feelings because the shame I carried as a wife of a physician when he had to cancel things
Mhm.
was off the charts. Like,
Yeah.
oh, my date night, I'm feeling bad because he missed date night and again, and somebody needs them because they're dying. That's I think nobody really talks about what physician wives and children go through, but it's a huge thing. And now, as a divorced couple, navigating it is tricky as you see the disappointment in your kid. And it, of course, triggers the same
Yeah.
disappointment. This isn't childhood disappointment. This is my marital disappointment and my trauma from that experience. But it is so important to walk this fine line of like saying it's okay to feel whatever you
Mhm.
feel
Mhm.
about your dad or your mom while not bad mouthing them. It's hard,
Exactly.
right? He's not
And
doing
yeah.
anything wrong when he gets
Yeah.
called in. He's
Yeah.
not. And they're not doing anything wrong for feeling disappointed that he couldn't show up when they thought he was coming.
Yeah.
But it's easier said than done to hold back what you want to say if you've been hurt the same way they're
Yeah.
hurting.
Oh, totally. Totally. And I would also say, like, give yourself grace, like to
Yeah.
you and all parents, because sometimes things are going to slip. We're going to have a little eye roll or a little moment of, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's okay. Cause you're totally right. Like what a tricky line for you to be walking or navigating, and to hold our kids' feelings, to be able to in the moment try to separate like what's theirs, what's mine, what's shared between me and my ex. That's really tricky work. And so yeah, I think it's so important to give yourself grace, to allow your kid to have their own emotional experience.
Yeah.
and for, for us to have our own space to process our emotions. And then also, I think the other thing that I would add in the mix is to not let our own guilt and shame allow our kids' emotions to then start running the show.
Mm.
And so my kid can have their feelings about my ex, and I'm okay for them to say how they feel, but I can still set boundaries around maybe the language that's allowed,
Yeah.
around behaviors that are allowed. Because I think this is the other dynamic that happens where the parents, like, I feel so guilty
Oh,
because I
yeah.
feel I've caused the divorce, or I've caused emotional harm or emotional pain to my kids through this process. And so from that place of guilt, sometimes I think we overcompensate by
Yeah.
making so much space for our kids' feelings, where then there's no boundaries, or there's no expectations, or we let them off the hook of things that we probably, sometimes, of course, we want to have grace when they're struggling, but not be also letting them off the hook from accountability or responsibility,
Right.
or those things, which is
Yeah.
another a tricky dynamic that I see can come up when we're trying to figure out, what do we do with our kids' feelings about an experience that is my adult experience, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And kids are not all kids, probably, but maybe it's because I'm a therapist. My kids are pretty savvy in understanding if they've been traumatized or not. Sometimes it's my 12-year-old overuses certain
Yeah.
words, but
Yeah.
I think we are navigating, maybe it is a Gen Alpha thing, I don't know, but like we're navigating how to parent children who are a little more aware
Mm-hmm.
of mental health
Mm-hmm.
and the impact on how we're parenting them on them. Like they have some awareness of
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
so you can probably, I suspect, easily be manipulated by kids. And I think that's part of being a kid, is learning how to work your parents.
Yes. A
I-
kid's job is literally to push boundaries until boundaries are found.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the job of childhood. One of
Yes.
the important of childhood. Yeah.
I have a funny story about my 12-year-old that I'm sure he wouldn't mind telling. He oftentimes, we're very similar. So we push each other a little bit, a lot. And he will say, I'm allowed my feeling. You've said I can have my feelings. And sometimes his feelings are big. He'll hold it in. He has a lot of empathy. And then it comes out kind of all at once. So like once a month, he'll have, and he's identified this, which is funny. I think I run in cycles, and once a month, I usually explode because I don't let it all. But he also probably talks about that with his therapist. Anyway, he said a few weeks ago, I called him to tell him we weren't going to be able to go golfing as planned because it was raining where I was, but not where he was. And I started the conversation with, I know you're going to be disappointed. And he was emotional and he was disappointed. But instead of really listening and saying yes, he said, don't tell me how I feel.
Mm.
And I was like, I didn't tell you. He goes, yeah, you said I was disappointed. And I was like, oh, I was trying to like break the news softly and validate feelings that I thought he would have. He didn't want me to tell him how he felt. I was like, oh my gosh. It was a strange conversation, but an
Yeah.
eye-opening one. And we ended up having a great conversation where I said, how do you want me to deliver news like that? What do you want me to do?
Mm.
He said, I want you to be direct, very direct, and just tell me. Oh, okay. And that's been working much better for us. I was trying to soften the blow. And
Yeah. He sounds like a deeply feeling kid, the high sensitive nervous system. And sometimes using emotional words with kids like that, it's too much,
well,
because
okay.
their heart is so open, and it's so easy to access emotion that, even especially from a parent, the use of an emotional word, it's too much. And so
That's so interesting because yes,
they need a way to access emotion that feels kind of safe.
yeah,
And so it sounds like the dynamic that you got there is what I think of as a classic, like, the best emotional defense is a good offense. So deeply feeling kids often cover up their vulnerability because, of course, he was disappointed, but what you
Sure.
got was anger.
Right. It directed at me. I was like, I'm
So he
trying to be
probably,
sensitive, but you're right. He is a
yeah,
highly
yeah,
sensitive person. So that's really interesting and
yeah.
really helpful.
And, I think that is into the topic of what we're talking about because we can often see anger and we think that our kid is angry and that's it.
Yeah.
But anger, as you know, as a therapist, is often a secondary emotion, meaning that there's often a more vulnerable emotion underneath.
Mm.
And I remember my dad and I going on a trip when I was in my 20s. And after my parents got divorced, I would go and have dinner with him once a week. And I think it was fine. We'd talk a little bit. And I remember us talking about that on this trip in my 20s. And he was reflecting on how there was a lot of silence in those meals or those meetings, and how he thought I was just a moody teenager, and maybe kind of mad or whatever. And I just remember thinking and saying to him, like, no, I was hurting, but I didn't know how to talk about that.
Yeah.
I did, and he didn't really know how to ask about it. And I think what he assumed was kind of respectful space, just giving me space because I'm a moody teenager. I think
Right.
I was quietly yearning for him to get a bit curious or to somehow connect with the pain underneath that I didn't really have a lot of language for. And I think we don't have to go in like guns a-blazing, go for the jugular of like, you're in a lot of pain, we have to plant the seeds and be mindful about how we're bringing those conversations up and just make a lot of space. But just even to have that framing of that, even if what we're seeing is anger or defiance or you don't get it or a lot of vitriol thrown at us, it's a front
Right.
for that's underneath.
Yeah.
And we don't want to tell our kids that directly because they will deny it.
Right.
But I think the more that we can hold that framing as parents and get curious about what that pain might be underneath, the easier it might be to start to guide us to how do we start to help our kid to access that vulnerability underneath
Yeah.
and make a lot of space for it. Because divorce is listed as an adverse childhood experience on the list of adverse experiences that kids can have that impact them as adults.
Yep.
But what we know about adverse experiences is that they don't inherently cause traumatic symptoms. For example, that so much of the adversity that we go through, the impact of it depends on how it was cushioned by the people around us. And so a difficult experience can be painful long-term or not painful long-term. And one of the big indicators of that is how the people around us, especially our closest caregivers, responded to that experience and supported us through it.
When my kids went through those times of just significant emotional response to the disappointment or the cancellation, I did talk to their therapist. What can I do? I don't want them to have lifelong trauma from this. What can I do? And she said just what you described. You just be their safe person. You're always there. And leave the door open for conversation and see them, make them feel seen and heard and supported and loved. And that might just be being there, being at home, being ready. And we know this is going to be an ongoing thing. His career isn't changing and there's nothing he can do to change this part of who he is. So as their mom, you've got to be the cushion, really.
And that's amazing that you asked your therapist that and you're open to kind of working through that. 'Cause one of the most painful experiences as a parent is to witness something happen either through your own actions, right? Sometimes like last time we were talking, like sometimes it's our own stuff that's harming our kids. Sometimes it's somebody else. But I think that's just such a painful experience to witness your kid struggling or suffering or experiencing their own emotional pain.
Yeah.
And it's hard to not over involve yourself in the fixing of that
Mhm.
and to allow your kid their own journey while also being their safe person. Again, going back to that like balancing act, it's such a balancing act to not over involve yourself in a way that kind of almost denies their feelings, right?
Yep.
Because you're just trying to get in there and fix, but also really is helping you position yourself that you can to be there for them and to be that safe place and to help them to process and make sense of their world like that. One of the research around trauma and resilience, one of the most important factors also in kind of how difficulties in childhood do or don't impact us in our adulthood is having a coherent narrative
Mm.
about our own experience.
Yep.
And so kids are developmentally egocentric. So they think things are about them that they're at.
Right.
And so part of our job as the adult guiding kids through especially a difficult situation like divorce is helping them to understand their own emotions and their own experience and in a developmentally appropriate way that's also respecting, the co-parent and not putting too much information onto your kid is to help them to understand what happened,
Yeah.
meaning that not about them,
Right. It's
that
not
they didn't
personal.
remember what happened, that it makes sense that whatever they're feeling makes sense.
Right.
And, to just help them to slowly evolve their narrative around what happened and what it means about them and what it means about their life as they kind of grow up and throughout the evolution of that co-parenting journey. Cause it is such a long journey, right? There's like
Yeah.
the acute after, well, there's all the stuff before the divorce. And
Right.
then there's acute healing phase after. And that sometimes I think we have to have a lot of grace because that can look messy and we can be not showing up for our kids in the way that we would like to. And it's okay when
Yep.
we're only human and we can only do what we can do. And the healing is long term. And
Yeah.
so some of that is happening over time that
Yeah.
might not feel ready to have some of those conversations in the first months or even year or whatever. And that's okay. Because those conversations that help a kid to really work through their own life narrative and sense of self, they happen over the short, medium, and long term.
Yes. I think as we're talking, I was thinking about the idea and what we know about how we choose partners. And it's, I guess, ironic. We choose oftentimes when we are unhealed or we haven't done work. We are prone as humans to choose a partner who is similar to the parent we have the most unfinished business with, right? If we had a parent, not everyone has a parent who really hurt them, but sometimes we do. And they could be parents that never got divorced. They could be parents that just worked a lot. And the child, you took it personally. Whatever it was, we have a tendency to seek out a partner who has those qualities. So I think when things don't work out in those situations, and then we go through divorce and we have children, I do think it makes it even more difficult to stand by and witness so often the same thing that happened to us as a child happening to
Yeah.
our children. That is
That's
not that is not my situation, but I see that
Mhm.
over and over again with people that I work with. And not only in their kids, but in themselves. Oh, my mom married this, and now I've married this. And like, it's just, we don't break a cycle a lot of times until sometimes the second marriage or second relationship or later. So I think it makes it that much more difficult for a parent, and this could be men or women, going through or having gone through a divorce and now co-parenting with someone who's essentially reflecting back your own childhood wounds. So now your
Yeah.
kid is going through it and that's reflecting back. And your ex-spouse, or sometimes even your spouse,
Mhm.
is doing to them exactly what was done to you that caused harm. I think
Yeah.
that, do you see that, and are you in a place to guide parents through that? I want to say this is why I think it's so important for not only kids to go to therapy when their parents are going through the divorce. I think all kids probably should go to therapy, but additionally, the parents.
Because you, as the parent, you need to be able to parse out, so separate out what happened to you and the behaviors between you and your ex versus what is the dynamic between your ex and your kids.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes we conflate those,
Yeah,
meaning that we think it's the same thing. And sometimes it is, like sometimes it
right,
is. But even if it is, the more that you can heal your own wounds from that, the the better you will be able to show up for your kid and in that situation,
right.
because you'll be making decisions that are based on your grounded mama bear or
Yes,
papa bear, right? Energy,
yeah,
and not from a traumatic reenactment.
right.
So
Because we don't want to put the narrative, those old narratives that we have that we need to work through for ourselves, onto our kids. And I think it's important for you, if you can, to describe what narrative formation, like when it starts. And because I think it's what
what do you
is
say?
for people who don't know or understand
Mm,
what you're
okay.
saying when you say for
Yeah.
them to form their narrative. Because
Yeah.
there is an age, a developmental time frame where that really starts. And, but it's ongoing. But for some of us who had a significant traumatic event happen during our childhood, I think our narrative can stay stuck
Yeah.
throughout adulthood. So, can you talk more about that so people understand what you
Yeah.
mean by a healthy narrative?
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you an example. Maybe that might be the easiest.
Yep.
I'll give you two examples. So if you are, especially if you're younger, because that's when you're developmentally more egotistical, you may hold the narrative very subconsciously, probably, that um, something about me caused the divorce. Maybe my parents fought a lot, and when um, I wet my pants, and they argued about how to handle it. And then I got in trouble at school and they argued about how to handle it. And then whatever, something, I hit my brother and they got into a huge argument about how to handle it.
Yeah.
And then they got divorced, and maybe they made a comment or maybe they didn't. Right. So sometimes it's explicit where one parent says kind of something kind of crappy about um, the kids' behaviors or the kids kind of being a cause of the tension or the conflict. But
Right.
sometimes it does, it's not even that explicit. It's just that the kid takes on this idea that when I struggle or when I act out or when I have a need, it creates conflict and people leave.
Yeah.
So that is a very subconscious narrative. And so over time, it kind of can take hold as needs are dangerous or people leave when I cause a scene, right? When
Right.
I make something an issue. And so I learn to swallow my voice. I learn that when I make a mistake or do something that upsets somebody, that's threatening.
Mhm.
And so that's what I mean about the development of a narrative. And it's very subconscious, right? Kids
Right.
aren't consciously saying that usually, although sometimes they will
Yeah.
say it. And by the way, if your kid is saying that, in some ways it's a gift because they're saying it out loud so you can
Yes.
address it explicitly
Yes.
with them.
Yep.
Most kids, they're holding it in, and
Right.
you might get the acting out behaviors or whatever, but you won't see that subconscious narrative.
Right.
And so then in adulthood, it looks like abandonment wounds, or it looks like not speaking up when I'm mad, because when I'm mad, I did things like hit my brother, and then it caused a lot of problems. Right.
Yeah.
And so that it's a subconscious narrative, and often it lives on even without words, even just in my own body reactions. Right. When I get tense, when there's a bit of tension in the conversation, my whole body tenses up and I start to get scared.
Yep.
And I don't say what I actually feel.
Right.
So does that make sense that
Oh, yeah.
let's talk about the narrative?
Yeah. And I think that different narratives can be formed, many different ones. Dax Shepard, I don't know if you know who he is. Dax Shepard, he has a podcast. He's a celebrity, but he did a podcast episode, and I heard a clip of him talking about divorce and his parents' divorce. And he said, what happens in divorce is, and this is obviously part of his narrative, but I think it's probably somewhat common, is that when one parent leaves, and in a lot of situations, not every, but in some situations, including my own, sometimes dad leaves and then there's very little, if any, contact after he leaves. And what a kid learns, the abandonment wound shows up later in life, possibly. But what you learn is, oh, he left. He's a parent. Leaving is an option. Okay, now I've got to do whatever I need to do to make sure this other person doesn't leave. Because if
Mhm.
they leave,
Yeah.
so leaving
Yeah.
becomes an option, right? Is what he was trying to
Yeah.
say. And
Yeah.
that is a very subconscious wound that, as a child and a teenager, I said repeatedly that their divorce
Hmm.
didn't bother me that dad left and moved away and we barely saw him ever again. Like,
Yeah.
but now I understand fully what happened and what that meant to me, because the abandonment wound is my deepest. It shows up. I've had to
Mhm.
work so hard on that, but that's why. And so I heard him say that and I thought, oh, yeah. But the other thing that happens is that you become parentified,
Yeah.
overperformer, jump through hoops to make sure the other person isn't going to leave you.
Yeah.
Because now, as a child, you realize these people don't have to stay.
Yeah.
There are other children who are securely attached and who have not experienced this, who have never had that thought in their mind, my parent could leave me, right?
Yeah.
They are fully secure. Many of us are not. And that's
Yeah.
why. And I
Yeah.
think I talk a lot about divorce not always being the worst thing for a family, because
Mhm.
if a child is in a home where there's a lot of arguing and disruption and the two people need to live apart, then that's what's best for the child. And not every parent is suitable to stay in a child's life either. So sometimes they've got to leave. But
Well,
showing up. So let's talk about that scenario, if you don't mind. How, as the parent who stays, do we need to show up to make a child feel safe and secure? Is there any way to prevent an attachment or an abandonment wound in a situation where one parent is no longer existing or is barely existing in the child's life, either after a divorce or in a situation maybe where there was never a marriage, but there's a breakup?
yeah, that's a good question. Is it possible to prevent the wound? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually about preventing the wound so much as doing the things that we know help foster secure attachment,
Mhm.
because it's not always about preventing every wound, but about fostering resilience and security to move through that. And so, because what I worry about is if we hold this idea that there's something that I can do that will stop my kid from experiencing pain. And that's, I think, where we can get into this thing of trying so hard in a way that denies our kid to actually have that feeling. And
Would that
really,
be overfunctioning? Would that be overfunctioning?
yeah, it
Or
would be like our kid comes home and is like, oh, it was Father's Day, you know, like they're drawing cards at school for Father's Day and your kid is feeling a bit sad. And you jump in with, oh, you know, you can draw a card for this person, this person, this person, which is true. Like we do at some point want to say that, but we also want to make space for the feeling.
right.
Or anytime kind of that conversation comes up, we're so quick to jump in to like help our kids see that they're loved and that there's all these people in their lives, which again, that is important to help our kid to see that. But we want to just be mindful that we're not doing it as a way to deflect from their own emotional experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important.
But I think if we're focused on fostering secure attachment,
Yeah.
and I think in our society we're so like hyper individualistic, right? Like, the nuclear family is like we only see that as the attachment system, which like most cultures that's bizarro.
Right.
The an ecosystem. Our attachment is about our extended family and our community and our cultural traditions and our religious traditions and the land that we live on. And right, it's so much deeper and broader than that. And so I think to fill our kids' cup as much as we can with rich emotional experiences, rich relational connections, safe adults, multiple safe adults is such a gift to a child.
Yeah.
And I think that those are the things when we talk about, you know, how to prevent abandonment wounds. Our kids may always feel that yearning or that loss.
Yeah.
And so it's not about pretending it's not there or like substituting it,
Right.
but it's about creating resilience and richness around it so that they can move through that and understand that that's a wound, but it's not about them. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that the desire to prevent that probably comes from a place of shame or guilt, one or the other.
Yeah.
And that's probably really common too. Oh my gosh, I created this situation that they're in. I chose this person that is now gone.
Yeah.
I need to fix or prevent, or when what you're saying is what we can do is just provide the cushion through safe people and other opportunities for secure attachment in their world.
And making, again, this is about the narrative coherence, is allowing our child to have thoughts and feelings and questions about what happened or about relationship. And again, answering in a developmentally appropriate way, right? We don't want to overburden them with the details so that, because there is a point where they're trying to make sense of what happened and why. And is it about me or is it not about me?
Right.
And so we want to use enough curiosity and compassion about what they're holding and what they're struggling with and how painful that is to hold it, to wonder.
Yep.
And then we can kind of come in with a bit of that reassurance, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to have abandonment wounds. Also, that's painful to see because also I know how painful it is in my own system. And so sometimes that urgency, we're acting from our own.
100%. So I wanted to tap into the four horsemen a little bit in regards to divorce. And I'm going to share a little bit of something that was something a little vulnerable for me in my situation, my younger self, and talk about this because I think it's another thing that shows up in these situations. Now, my older son, who's 28, I never married his dad. I had him when I was in college. And I was a very, very young 21-year-old new mom. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, I did. I went to grad school and I had him and I got an incredible job and like was doing all these things. At the time, though, I felt really insecure about being a young mom.
Mm,
And I was a young mom when he started school in a community with an academic kind of community. So a
mm,
lot of the mothers and fathers were a bit older because they had put the career first and
mm,
then had children later. So I was really young to the point where people would say, "Is that your au pair?" if we were on the playground
mm,
with friends. So as a young mom, I had, I would say, a high level of perfectionism in regards to my parenting, which came from my own insecurity and wanting to prove that as a single mom, my kid was still going to be amazing, right? And I created a lot of issues for him by doing, like me always wanting him to show up perfect. Because in
mm.
reality, now I can see that in reality, I thought he was a reflection of me. And so if he ever messed up, that was going to reflect poorly on me. And thankfully, my parenting style with my two younger children has shifted tremendously in that way. But can you talk about possibly how this could show up for a newly divorced parent or parents where we are worried about what people think of us
Uh,
and how we are, how that's showing up and we're putting that on our kids? And do you see that?
yeah, I think with the perfectionism, just as you said, I think it can be worry about how other people are viewing what happened and maybe what we allow our kid to say, even privately, about their experience, about what happened. With people pleasing, I see a lot of overcompensating
Yeah.
and feeling a lot of responsibility for what happened and feeling like we really let our kids down. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that can show up as then, not following through with things we should follow through with out of our own experience of shame or guilt.
Yeah.
I think with the perfectionism also, I see that coming into the co-parenting relationship because perfectionism is about high control, needing to control through safety. And
Yeah.
now you have an entire other household that you can't control, nor should you, but you probably want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I, I see a lot having to separate out what is actually an issue for you to address with your ex about what is happening in their house and what is not. What do you really have to let go of?
Mhm.
Because they're going to, unless it's harmful or abusive, they're allowed to do what they want to do in terms of their rules and routines and rhythms and that kind of thing. And so yeah, I see it showing up in kind of what we're trying to control and how we're trying to control it.
Right.
In terms of hyper independence, I think um, the way that I see this showing up is often the working with one parent after divorce and now holding the feeling like, well, that went south. So the lesson here really is I can't depend on people.
Right.
Often that's the thing that comes out of that process. And so just making sure that we work through enough of that we're not downloading that narrative onto our kids that you
Yeah.
can't trust it, that relationships inevitably don't work out, that you have to take everything on your own. And that kind of goes into that self-sacrifice thing, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like no one else is going to do it. So it's all
Yeah.
it's all on me. I think that often can be the feeling when you are a single parent or if you are in a relationship but you're kind of a single parent in who's still in a relationship because you're doing everything, that idea that like it all falls on me, so I can't have my own needs, I can't set boundaries, I can't show up for myself, and just how that plays out for our kids is
Yeah.
we think we do have to make some sacrifices for our kids as,
Right.
as
Right.
parents. The
Right.
difference between that and the energy of I have to do it all. I have to give everything.
Yeah.
I can't keep anything to myself if I want to be, a good, worthy parent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. There's so much balancing going on. And often in a time like it's not only one of the hardest times for our children, but one of the hardest times for the parents going through it. So,
Yeah. And I think that when we go through stressful times, we can double down on those survival strategies.
mhm,
So, if I already struggle with perfectionism, overachieving, that high control, and now things are feeling out of control,
yes.
and I'm not looking publicly how I would like to present as this maybe like whatever perfect nuclear family, whatever that means. It doesn't
Yep.
exist, by the way. Then my perfectionism can kind of kick into high gear, and I can
Yeah.
feel all of a sudden really trying to over control and really trying to overachieve in other areas of my life, including, as you were mentioning, the behavior of my child or the
Yeah.
performance of my child. They become the proxy for my own my own overachieving perfectionism
Right.
to make up for that. There's this alleged mark on my
Mm,
record
right.
from this divorce.
Right. Right. Now you're a kid. Now you not only are you a divorced person, but your kid is a child of divorce. And right, the concern of judgment, outside judgment is just tremendous. So I know our time is kind of running out for today. One thing I would love to get your take on is how important it is, and maybe you could give us some tools for regulating our nervous system, specifically for people who are going through the divorce process and the idea of co regulation with our kids. If you can just talk a little bit about that, because
Sure.
so many of my current clients are in what I would call high conflict divorces. And
Hmm.
that leaves you activated. And many times I think that you don't even have an awareness of how
Yeah.
activated you are. And I think it's really important to get yourself as regulated as possible
Yeah.
with your children during this time. And
Yeah.
it's hard. That's a hard ask, right?
Mm.
It's hard to ask someone who's going through this traumatic, horrible time to step up and
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
regulated. But
Mm.
I want to talk
Yeah.
about how we can do it and
Mhm.
why we need to try our best to do that.
Sure. Yeah, totally. So adults also need co-regulation,
Mhm.
especially when we're going through our own adversity. So the first thing I would say is to get regulated to me is to find your people,
Yeah.
to find where, if you don't have close friends or family, then get yourself a therapist. You need some other space outside of the time with your kids to explicitly emote and process. And so, whether that's creating a bit of your own ritual to process, whether it's journaling or talking through with someone or whatever it is, you need something to help you to move through the emotions, because you cannot regulate what you don't allow yourself to experience. And
Yeah.
so you can't just jump to regulation. You
Right.
need to also have a way to feel the feelings and to process them, and to have like a space where you can vent, allow yourself to have all the feelings, and you are much more likely then to be able to stay some amount of regulated with your kid.
Yeah.
If not, it's going to come out in those stressful moments of your kid challenging you or pushing your boundaries or having 1,000 requests or whatever it is.
Right. And I would say
Uh,
multiple ways, just not to interrupt you,
yeah.
but I
No,
would
jump in.
say sometimes we think, oh, this doesn't work for me. I can't meditate. So what do I do? You need to have a
Yeah.
gigantic, big, whatever those big toolboxes are called, the rolling ones,
Yeah.
like, full of
Yeah,
ways,
totally.
right? Like You need
Yeah.
to have the little group of friends that you can get together with. You need to have the one, two, or three really
Yeah.
close friends who get it, who've been there, a family member who's willing to listen, a therapist, a yoga
Yeah.
class, a sauna,
Yeah. Find
multiple
your space.
things.
Yeah.
Because one thing that shows up a lot in the people that I talk to when we finish our conversations, a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, it was so nice to be able to talk to you about this. I feel like I can't keep sharing with my sister or my mom or my best friend. They're getting tired of it." And it is a long, drawn out process. So
Yeah.
that's why I say, like, a
Yeah.
scaffolding or a toolbox or whatever you want to say to hold you up.
Totally.
And okay, sorry
Totally.
for interrupting you, but
No, that exactly. You got to find your toolkit. It's not just one thing.
yeah.
And it's regulation during and after
Mhm.
an dynamic with your friends. So what we're just talking, what you just shared, all those strategies are amazing. We need to be doing those regularly in our daily life. That's the kind of before and after those
Mhm.
moments with our kiddo. Sometimes when we're going through acute difficulty, some of the strategies that I talk about with parents are explicit compartmentalization. So our ability to compartmentalize is is a skill. We don't want to do it permanently because then we're just numbing out to what we
Right.
need to be actually addressing. But in a moment with our child, or when we have to do a presentation at work or whatever, we do want to learn how to do that consciously. So we can develop a visualization of a container where we just take all of the feelings about the divorce, what's happening right now, and we put them away and we put the lid on, and then, or we visualize the image of a strong mama bear giving us a hug and feel the energy moving into our nervous system, or who represents some image of somebody who represents protective strength. And we kind of connect with the energy of that image before we move into picking our kid up and getting them resettled at our house or whatever. So we can almost like putting on our putting on our armor or our game face,
Yeah.
so that we are priming our nervous system to stay as regulated as possible in the moment with our kids.
Yep. Yeah.
And then we're more likely, then there's the strategies in the moment, right? Of taking a breath, using ice or cold water on our face, or all of those strategies that are very Googleable about regulation in the moment.
Yeah.
But so much of it is what happens before and after. And so those are some of the strategies that I like to just, because we want to honor what's happening, but we also want to be able to sometimes put it away as much as we can to be able to step into being the parent that we need to for our kids. And then on those days when you are just falling apart and your kid is like, oh my gosh, it's just to then have a lot of compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
And to maybe have the sentence that you say to your kid at the ready about what's happening. So something, where you're telling your kid, it's not them, it's you, a developmentally appropriate version of what you're experiencing,
Yeah.
and then reassurance that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So have that little mantra or whatever at the ready. So on those days where you are falling apart, it's okay. That's going to happen sometimes. Hey, kiddo, I know it's hard to see mama sad or struggling. I'm okay. I want you to know, like, everybody loves you. It's not about you. Let's, whatever, watch a movie tonight or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, that sharing with your child that you're not okay is also really good for them. Because if you're always strong and you always show up no matter what, rock solid for them, they may set an expectation for themselves that they always have to be strong. And we want to show them sometimes our vulnerable side and say, today's been a hard day. Can we just watch a movie tonight? I just want to cuddle on the couch. Because
And kids are all, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Kids are also highly intuitive, and they know how. And so if we continuously are in a lot of pain and then they're like, Mama, what's wrong? You're like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm okay. That creates a dissonance for them that is confusing
Yes.
and doesn't help them. Again, going back to helping them to understand their narrative, creates a cognitive dissonance, a narrative dissonance where they're like, I'm seeing this consciously, right? I'm seeing this, but my parent is saying that, like that, this is confusing.
Yeah.
How do I make sense of emotions?
Yes.
And so we don't want to spew our emotions all over our kids.
Right.
But to your point, it is okay and important for them to see that sometimes we are not okay and sometimes we're vulnerable. At the same time, we want them to know that we are going to be able to handle what we're experiencing. We're not completely falling apart and they are safe and we are still their safe person. So it's balancing those two things.
Yes. Yes. We talk in our house a lot about two things can be true at once.
Yeah.
I can be perfectly fine and okay, and I will be ready to go tomorrow morning. But tonight, I'm really tired and overwhelmed and worn out, and I need to go to bed. Those can be true at the same exact time. Thus, I think my 12-year-old saying, I'm allowed to feel my feelings. Like I have instilled this in him that it's okay. It's okay. Your feelings are your own, and it's okay to have them, even if they're big.
I love it so much.
Yeah. So thank you again so much for all of this. It's just incredible. I feel like we could probably talk all day about this because there are just so many things and it's uncharted territory for most of the people going through it and even people who are co-parenting. My experience has been that co-parenting is there's a constant learning curve. As your kids grow and get older, there are new things to figure out how to co-parent through. And so, there's an endless number of things that we could talk about. But all of the things we covered today, I think, are really supportive and helpful. And I love having your perspectives and your expertise to share.
Well, it was lovely to speak with you, and I so appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All of Mackenzie's information and how she works with families and kids will be shared in the show notes. For anyone who is listening and wants more information, please feel free to reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, Apple Podcasts. You can always leave me a note in the comments in any of those places. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mackenzie. I feel like we'll probably talk again, and I look forward to that. So
Same.
thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.